Back in the late 90s, the sound of screeching tires was practically music to a drifter's ears. There was something unique about watching a supercar skid across the tarmac with both violence and grace. We grow up with this belief that supercars are simply beyond our reach. Those sleek, out-of-this-world designs, very loud engines that just roar, and a price tag only a few can afford. Ferrari, Lamborghini, Porsche, one could go on and on. But the late 1980s and early 1990s came along with something that no one expected. It didn't come from the big supercar manufacturers. It came from Nissan. It was called the Nissan S13 Silvia. At first glance, this car didn't have that supercar look, and neither did it have that monstrous engine. As a matter of fact, it was pretty affordable, far cheaper than any Ferrari or Lamborghini with a smaller engine too. As such, it seemed just about like any other regular sports car. This made the Nissan S13 way more different than what a normal supercar would look. This was going to change the way people thought of performance cars forever. The Nissan S13 first hit the streets in 1988 as part of the Silvia line, a lineage of cars that Nissan had been refining since the 1960s. It was the natural evolution of those earlier models, but brought something unique to the table in the world of affordable sports cars. The S13 was quick, light, and had just the right amount of power under the hood to make it a serious contender on the streets. One thing about the S13 is that its engine varied in different markets. However, the engine that got the highest praise from most customers was the SR20 Det. This turbocharged 2.0 liter produced about 205 horsepower. Now this is where it gets interesting. On paper, that might not seem particularly impressive against the monstrous V8s and V12s of supercars, which churn out 2 or 3 times the power. That's to tell you that horsepower isn't everything. But what made the S13 shine even more was its on-paper power translated into real-world performance. The SR20 Det was not just light and quick-acting, but also a very tunable, veritable canvas for car lovers. With a handful of modifications, larger turbos, better exhaust systems, and improved intercoolers, the S13 could easily push past 300 horsepower. The best part? What you will spend to modify the car won't match a supercar budget to get it done. Even with the speed, the car had balanced, sharp handling and excellent weight distribution, along with a set of suspensions that allowed drivers to carve hard through the corners without ever letting loose. The S13 succeeded in making the drive enjoyable and engaging with approachability for the average person. The car, with its lightweight body, rear-wheel drive, and an absolutely perfectly balanced chassis, was an excellent performer both on the racetrack and while having fun on winding roads. The S13 felt alive. It's a car that loved being driven hard, yet was forgiving enough to let less than advanced drivers push it to the edge without losing control. On both road and track, the reputation of the S13 came rather quickly. It wasn't just keeping up with other sports cars, it was outperforming them. And when put up against some of the most iconic supercars of the time, the S13 didn't just survive, it thrived. The S13 could run with, and in some cases, even outclass much more expensive cars with the right tuning and a good driver behind the wheel. It could run well in races, in drifting competitions, and on casual drives during weekends. But where the S13 really started to shine was in drifting. It was the 1990s, and Japan was just booming with the sport, making the need for just the perfect car to pull off those sharp sideways moves prevail. The S13 was made for this, with the setup being rear-wheel drive and its ideal weight distribution. You could chuck the car into a corner, and it'd slide through predictable and controllable. Easy to handle, even when pushed to the limit. It didn't really take long for the S13 to become an icon for drifting. Of course, Nissan had never engineered the S13 specifically for that kind of driving, but it became the face of the sport. Drifters loved how easy it was to modify. The car was like a blank canvas for their creativity. You could swap engines, adjust the suspension, and add whatever you wanted. You had, for a fraction of the cost of a supercar, a car just as exciting, if not more so, on the road. It wasn't drifting alone that set the S13 apart from many. It is in its accessibility that this car was truly unique. Supercars were and still are unreachable for the majority of the world. They were trophies for a small, elite circle of drivers who could pay for the best and nothing less. But the S13? That was something different. A car that anybody could buy without taking out a second mortgage on their house. And once you had it, you could make it yours. You didn't need an engineering team or millions of dollars. If you could turn a wrench, you could tune it yourself. That was a game changer. Suddenly, performance driving and racing weren't solely for the elite anymore. It put speed and performance in the hands of regular people. The S13 democratized driving in a way supercars never would. And huge it was. You didn't need a Ferrari to have a fast, fun car. All you needed was an S13, a few tools, and a desire to push the car to its limits. Time passed, and the S13 started gathering a little community. Meetups, events, clubs that were modification and race car-like. The S13 wasn't just a car, it was a culture. Individuals wanted to show off the latest build, share tips, and swap stories of races and drift competitions. The S13 brought people into it in a way supercars never could. It was approachable. It was relatable. If you are enjoying this video, appreciate it by giving it a thumbs up, and if you have not subscribed, hit that subscribe button. Let's continue. It wasn't all about speed or performance. It was also all about connection. The thing that really made this car very special was how it connected people. You'd see an S13 pop up at some car meetup or perhaps a local racing event, and in no time, it will have drawn people to itself. Whether you were an avid mechanic or a newcomer to the world of cars, owning an S13 meant you were part of something. It didn't matter if it was just outright racing or drifting. What this car symbolizes is a shared passion, a common bond among guys. These bonds often lead to talking about the car's modifications and exchanging tips to maximize performance. It is just one of those cars that have created some friendships. Globally, it quickly became a centerpiece of weekend car meets and late-night drives. One could go to any parking lot and find a circle of S13 owners talking about the latest mods they had done, or taking turns revving their motors, each one unique in its own right. Whether you came to flex your new turbo setup or just shoot the breeze with other enthusiasts, the S13 community welcomed all with open arms. It wasn't some snooty supercar club where only a select few with fat wallets got to take part in anything. The S13 was for anyone and everyone, ranging from high school kids scraping together pennies for their first car to veteran drivers who'd spent decades modifying cars. It came to be the symbol of inclusivity in the world of automobiles, a car owned by anyone and enjoyed by anyone. Another big reason the S13 became such a phenomenon was its relation to tuning culture. The 90s were blowing up with tuning and modifying a vehicle in ways that would enhance either performance or appearance, or both. And right there at the heart of it all was the S13. Because of its design, the car was very easy to work on, and soon aftermarket companies began manufacturing parts particularly for the S13. You could change just about anything on the S13, from upgrading the engine to swapping out the suspension or adding a wide-body kit. The S13 became a blank canvas of sorts for car enthusiasts. It was a car you could make your own. Each one became a reflection of its owner's creativity and driving style. And the best part? You could do all this without spending anywhere near what it would cost to buy a supercar. But it wasn't just contained within the bounds of Japan either. The S13 went properly global. In the US, the 240SX, popularly known as the American cousin of the Silvia, became a darling to enthusiasts everywhere. In Europe, Australia, and elsewhere, the S13 gained the rightful reputation as a car capable of punching above its class. Wherever it went, people loved the S13 for what it was, a fun, fast, affordable sports car that could run with the big dogs. But how did the S13 stack up against the supercars of its time? Well, supercars were powerful and fast, yes, but what they didn't have was simplicity. The light building and straightforward mechanics of the S13 gave it a leg up in certain situations. On a twisty mountain road or a tight racetrack, the the S13 could more often than not run with or even pass up much more expensive cars. For the most part, supercars were all about raw power and speed in a straight line. But the S13, it's all about balance, control, and finesse. It wasn't all about horsepower. How you used it was what mattered. And it's in real-world driving conditions where handling and driver skill matter just as much as power that the S13 can actually embarrass some of the biggest names in the game. And that's exactly what started to happen. On tracks, in races, and even on the streets, the S13 proved it could hold its own against supercars on tracks, in races, and on the streets. It wasn't a car that just kept up with the pack, but a car that won. And it did so without the astronomical price tag. It became a giant killer, showing the world you really didn't need several $1 million to go fast. And that's what S13 maintains in the hearts of car enthusiasts today, several decades since its release. Today, it is a classic loved for what it is, a reminder of a time when anyone could get a car and make it into his or her own supercar version. But the S13 isn't a car for memories alone. It continues to inspire the tuning scene, and its influence can still be felt in modern performance cars today. The Nissan S13 was a game changer. It wasn't a car that needed some flashy badge or big bear of an engine to prove itself. What it had was balance, potential, and accessibility. It showed the world that one didn't have to pay a supercar price for performance. In the hands of a great driver, the S13 could make mincemeat of the best of the best. That's how the Nissan S13, a humble car by Nissan, took on the world of supercars and came out on top. Do not forget to subscribe and like our channel for more content.